Why do we suffer from persistent feelings of inadequacy despite real evidence of competence or success? Researchers believe that it has a lot to do with upbringing. So firstly, there is scripting, which starts when we're literally babies. And it has been experimented on before. If there are literally two babies sitting there in just their diapers and you can't tell which one is a boy and a girl, if you're told which one's a boy and a girl, we would always tend to give the boy the blue clothes and the squeaky hammer, and the girl the pink clothes and the dolly. You know, it's what we do. It's societal. It's amazingly easy, and it's an amazingly effective way of scripting our children into roles right from the very beginning. In fact, there's a great example of this because my wife and I literally scripted our son into loving elephants. Yeah. We decided, right, he is going to love elephants. So we bought him a little fluffy teddy elephant, and we told him he loved elephants. We told all of our friends he loved elephants. They all bought him birthday present elephants. He's got elephants on his duvet cover. He's got elephants on his curtains. He's got elephants on his pajamas. So as he's grown up, he's now just getting towards 6 years old. And guess what? He loves elephants. And he's building his whole identity around him. This is his thing. You know, it's very special to him, but they're not his thing. They're our thing that we imposed on him. And just take note of that, because that's really important for what I'm going to be saying a bit later. Secondly, imposter syndrome can come from a need for perfection. You know, sometimes people assume it's about low self-esteem or worry, but it's often a need of perfection. And this can also be an extension of that scripting, you know, parents programming children with superiority or class or family tradition. Simply praising other siblings can pressurize the child and later the adult to achieve or be a certain way. But that also means that they stop seeing their own achievements in a wider context. You know, you can say, I am the worst person out of 100 people. Yes, but you're talking about the top 100 people in the world. You know, the guy who comes last in the Olympic final 100-meter sprint can often not have the wider context that they're one of the best in the world, but they've lost in that cohort. So it's very important to understand the context of things. And then finally, there's this idea of duty. We feel that we've been given an opportunity, we've been given resource, we've been given a chance, and we want to be able to deliver that, to justify what's been given to us, etc., etc. We were just talking this morning, Anita, and I was telling her this morning I just finished helping a client put in an application for a grant. They paid me a lot of money to help them put in the application for the grant. Now, inside my head, there's an immediate worry that they've paid me money for this. What if they don't get the grant? In fact, it's a very difficult grant to get, so there's a very good chance they won't get it. How do I justify them spending money with me to do that if they don't get it? So these things can happen from this idea of duty. So how does it manifest? Well, it manifests in a number of different ways. And these are ones I took from a Harvard Business Review article. But these ideas of, I must not fail, you know, this is a huge pressure not to fail, because it will mean that if I fail, that means I'm found out. Paradoxically, when you're feeling like this, success itself becomes an issue because it brings attention. And if it brings attention, that can create further responsibility. It's like, oh no, now I have to do even better next time to be able to do it. And then I can't enjoy success, whatever that is. Again, another point to remember for later. The next thing you can feel is like, I feel fake. You know, the feeling I don't deserve an accolade, or that others have somehow been fooled into giving me an accolade. So getting the feeling that I've deceived people into believing I'm more than I am, you know, competence, skill, talent, whatever. And more to the point, I might have been promoted or put into a position of responsibility or of consequence where I could actually do damage. People are relying on me for stuff. So there's that pressure. What if I do damage to that? Because what I did, everything I've achieved was really down to luck. Related to the last one, this feeling of being fake, but out of my depth means that actual success is just dismissed as having been lucky somehow, or even worse, it was down to somebody else's work that I got this. And even if all of those things are proven wrong, you can think it's no big deal. If I achieved it, it must be not worth having. And these are some of the manifestations that go around inside a person's head, okay? But there's more. I'm not good enough. I'm not credible. I can't do this. They'll find me out. I will get a reputation. I don't have enough experience to be able to be charged in this amount, etc., etc., etc. You're an esteemed company. Have a read of these. Whoops, sorry, gone ahead of myself there. But just looking at that esteemed company that everyone is in, you can see that there are so many people who suffer from this. In fact, I would argue everybody suffers from this to a more or lesser extent. And it's a very important thing to recognize that everybody does it, and I'll explain why later. Claudia Winkleman, as an extra example, she had an interview with the Express recently, and she said that at any time she feels like she's going to be fired by the BBC from Strictly Come Dancing as the co-host. At all times. It's unbelievable how some people feel. And what does it result in, particularly for small business owners? This, first of all, that broadcasting of competence. Have you ever heard in sort of networking when people always lead with their qualifications? I've got this qualification, that qualification, that's why you should work with me because I know what I'm doing. This is something I did a lot when I got out of the army, because I'd studied in service and got my MBA, and I thought that was like the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory golden ticket that was going to get me anywhere, so I was going to dazzle people with my MBA and my cleverness, and hopefully distract them from the fact that I didn't have any commercial experience. And it took me quite a long time to work out that my MBA plus £2.50 might get me a cup of coffee. But then there's also a lack of understanding of your own value. And that leads to this obsession over pricing. Namely, if I'm not cheaper, somebody else is going to take the business. The competition will get the work. Over delivery. How many times have you heard this? You can call me anytime, day and night, and I'll answer the phone. Yeah. Call me at 3 o'clock on Sunday morning, I'll answer. That's how I'm different from the competitor. Well, that's not a unique selling point. That is commoditization of your own life. People ask for more and more and more for the same money. We justify in our heads, it's extra service, I'd lose them otherwise, etc., etc. But it is not good for your life. And then we have this inability to say no. How many have suffered with that? It's not just in business, but in life. You're faced with an assertive person who thinks nothing of asking for more and more and more in a way that they've clearly just expect it from you. And you can't seem to say no. You bite back on the words, you scream into a pillow, you fantasize about punching them on the nose, but no, you don't do any of those things. You just smile sweetly and you nod and you do it. And then that leads to the next thing. Number one, you fear being around that person or persons because of constantly having to do it. And you also damagingly start experiencing this kind of self-loathing and frustration that you never stuck up for yourself. And this is obviously massively disempowering for us, further damaging to our confidence, perception of our own worth and abilities. So we set out to fix this, right? So we clutch at the quick fix solutions. We look on Facebook and there's the black t-shirt guy sitting on his rented Lamborghini telling me, just use these 3 methods and I'm making 16 grand a week, etc., etc. Some 19-year-old supermodel looking girl telling you how their experience of this and that has changed their lives and so on and so forth. And you find that those things cost money, don't work. You find that your advertising doesn't work, your networking's not working. And you know, this is a downward spiral and it is very damaging to people. So how on earth do we get a grip of the self-perpetuating downward cycle? All of the stuff we read is really useful stuff, isn't it? You know, don't take yourself too seriously. Really? You know, think empowering thoughts. Cheers for that. That's really helpful stuff. See failure as a learning opportunity. Yeah. As irritating as all these things are, they are actually true, but there is some fundamental change in our way of thinking that has to happen before those sort of things can start working. That's what I'm concentrating on today, because that all starts with that lump of fat that resides between your 2 ears, your brain. Okay. The 2 centers of the brain which drive our thinking and behavior. Firstly, there's the prefrontal cortex. That's the highly evolved Homo sapien brain responsible for conceptualizing, modeling the future, abstract thought, that sort of thing. And then there's the amygdala, that little peanut blue looking thing, and that is referred to as the chimp brain. And that is the part of the brain that's responsible for fight, flight, emotions, base desires, those sort of things. And it's important to understand that the amygdala got there first. And it will take control if the prefrontal cortex can't come up with the answers to any given situation. In other words, if we are not driven by a higher values, vision, and purpose, then we'll be driven by the lower value center of the brain, the desire center. This is the part of the brain that drives us to seek pleasure, avoid pain, seek praise, avoid reprimand, avoid challenge, seek ease, all of those things. So it's here where things like speculation, gambling mentalities, addiction, overconsumption, herd mentality, fear, all live in that little blue part there. Going back to my description of scripting, this is also where scripting lies. This is the part of the brain that was trained into us for various reasons. And the amygdala has some interesting mechanisms that go back to us as our distant past when we were both predator and prey. The first one being a thing called patternicity. We are wired and programmed to look for things in camouflaged environments. You know, patterns that we can recognize. This is why psychologists and psychiatrists give these ink pictures for people to look at, because that's wired into our stimulus and response. And that's put through a thing called pareidolia. And that's the ability to indicate whether something's predator or prey, danger or opportunity. Again, wired straight to our emotional center. There's another thing called agenticity. This is the, when a pattern is recognized, you tend to see it alive. How many of you have ever walked into a room or into the kitchen or something at night and got a big fright from something that was there that you weren't expecting was there? Yeah? When you see a shirt hanging and you just get a big, massive jump out of your skin. That's this agenticity at work. You just see a shape, but your mind makes it alive. Okay. And then epiphenia. is the wired reaction to that. Is it danger? Is it threat? Is it opportunity? Do I fight? Do I run? Do I attack? Do I pounce? And those happen almost automatically and very quickly. And then finally, all of these things need to wire us for action, because the body and brain needs us to actually take action when you get these perceptions, get the adrenaline going, initiate action. It therefore accentuates and amplifies that impulse. The desire to chase if it's an opportunity, the desire to run or fight if it's a threat. And the point is that it's exaggerated. Have you ever heard the expression that nothing is ever as good or as bad as it first seems? That's this at work, okay? So what has all of this to do with imposter syndrome? Well, it's because imposter syndrome, while it has so many different manifestations, is, differently explained by the sufferers, but it always has that one thing in common, which is fear. And fear lives right there in the amygdala. So what can we do about it? Well, these mechanisms that I've described are hardwired into our ancient brains. They are base level programming. There is no turning them off. So the only way to really get around this is to move the impulse to act, or the control of our behaviors, away from the amygdala and back into that prefrontal cortex. So how can we do that? Well, the only real way to do that is through this. For me, this is the holy trinity, without which we can't really be in control of ourselves. Neither personally nor professionally. They are the core of leadership and of integrity. They're the basis of all self-worth. They are the basis of assertiveness, and they are incredibly liberating and empowering. But there's a but. These aren't things that can be chosen at random. You can't simply fling some words onto a whiteboard or something, or write them down and hope that these are going to somehow remove fear from your life. These are things that have to be chosen and understood with the utmost reflection and care. And going back to what I said before about upbringing, there is a lot which has shaped us in the way we are. And that's what we really need to first address. And it starts here. Because the way we are is a really complicated and intricate tangle of all the things we have lived and experienced. We've been shaped by our nationality, family, class, background, education, training, friends, siblings, schools, teams, etc., etc., etc. All of which have had huge influence on who we are, what we think. And we need to begin to explore these and become very, very curious about the question, is this truly what I believe, or has it somehow been scripted into me somewhere? And if so, how and by whom? Really harmless example from my upbringing. My dad loved Mercedes-Benzes. My dad's business partner loved BMWs. There was this friendly banter between them about who likes Mercedes-Benzes, who likes BMWs, and there was this constant kind of banter and argument going between them through my entire upbringing. Every time one or the other got a new car, they'd immediately drive it around to the other one's house to show them how wonderful it was. And there was always this kind of constant ribbing and teasing between them. Should that have an effect on me? Well, it shouldn't, but it does. If I even think of considering of buying a BMW, I get an almost physical reaction to it. In fact, I probably do actually get a physical reaction to it. My body will produce cortisol. It will produce stress hormones about this. And it sounds stupid, but going back to the deep amygdala, wired into my amygdala is a need for belonging. It is a need for safety within my tribe or herd or group. And my herd likes Mercedes-Benzes, and it definitely doesn't like BMWs. So to consider this is like a betrayal. And in doing so, from a very base psychological point of view, I risk losing my place in my tribe, my security, my safety, because there is nowhere else to go. And every one of us will have been influenced by these kind of factors, and those need to be explored. So as we reflect on what's been scripted and what's been taught, both experiences of life, we begin to be able to understand where all of our opinions come from. This also allows us to make some decisions about what we will hold to be true and what not. And these are very much decisions. Note, this is not an automatic rejection of everything that's been taught to us, and it's only an acknowledgement that something's been scripted, but then a very deliberate choice as to whether this is going to be taken forward and woven into the fabric of what we truly, truly believe. Or if we'll reject that opinion, or if it's ambiguous, undertake to do some research and revisit the issue and make a new opinion out of it. And as we do this, we begin to distill down our own true values and deep understanding of why they are our true values, and probably some sort of story behind them of where it all comes from. So back to my military career, I spent 2 decades using a set of values that were literally issued to me with my boots. Yeah, loyalty, selfless commitment, integrity, courage, discipline, and respect for others. To reel them off like that, this is how I was judged. This is how I judge people above and below me in the chain of command. This is what you use. However, having read Stephen Covey's 7 Habits for Highly Effective People, highly recommend that. But this is part of his exercise, is discovering your scripting, your true values. So I came up with my own set: integrity, generosity, empathy, determination, and action. Each of which has a very specific story and meaning within my background, which one day I might tell you about if I haven't bored you too much here. But similar to values, sometimes our goals, our aspirations, our idea of success have been scripted into us just as much as anything else. You know, are they really my goals, or are they my parents' goals? Are they really my goals, or is it my group of friends' goals? How have I decided upon these? Was it through a mentor, through a particular person or set of people? And once you understand that, you can explore it. So with your values clear, your ultimate goals clear, we can start this process of letting go. And this is all the scripting and the things that you don't want to believe in. You need to let them go. Any person or group whose values have, for some reason or other, become intertwined with your sense of worth or being, and have made you fear abandoning those, need to be considered. Because you can't let go of that which provides your belonging, your security, until you have something to go to. You can't leave your tribe until you've decided where you're going. Otherwise, you are abandoning yourself. That is why the values, the vision, and the purpose always must be decided upon first. Have you ever wondered why seemingly really intelligent people can support an idea which is basically stupid or nonsense? There might be a little bit of that sort of thing going on at the moment. So it's not about the idea, it's about the belonging. If you can imagine yourself in middle America at the moment, if you're a staunch Republican, grown up in a staunch Republican town, you have status, you have belonging, you have a happy life, you're a pillar of the community, and you're a member of the church, and suddenly this idea of wearing a face mask becomes being associated with being un-Republican, Think of the pressures that are under people, even if they think it's a good idea because you won't die and stuff. But people can be amazingly stupid because of this desire to remain with the crowd. You know, this is where we fear the consequences, straight to the fear, straight to the amygdala. Sometimes the fear is completely rational. Sometimes it exists because of the way systems that have been created and run around places, around workplaces, companies, etc. Upton Sinclair, famous author, said of systems, "It is difficult to get a man to understand something if his livelihood depends on his not understanding it." And this is what happens with that base fear. So the act of deeply reflecting upon and deciding upon our values and purpose is very much the business of that prefrontal cortex. The act of going through this process puts that prefrontal cortex in charge of our behavior. Will the amygdala still react? Yes. Will we still feel fear? Yes. Will we still have those impulses driven by the amygdala? Yes. It is base program. It does not get turned off. However, if you read Viktor Frankl, he was a psychologist and concentration camp prisoner, stated that between stimulus and response lies a choice, and that's what makes us different from animals. So when he was in the concentration camp interned, he made a decision that when the Nazi guards tortured him and the inmates, he felt empowered by the fact that he and he alone would decide upon how he reacted to that. And he said that act was what got him through that experience, because it empowered him and disempowered those who were trying to break him. So to put it another way, you're basically saying this: something's happened, right? Amygdala, what do you think? We know what you think about it already. So let's pause and ask prefrontal cortex, what do you think about it? And it can say, my values are clear. It can say, I will act in line with them. You know, my purpose is clear. I will do that which fulfills my purpose. My vision is clear. I will do that which brings me towards my vision. So it is now a situation where we have the resilience to have courage to do what is in line with our higher thinking, despite the fear or discomfort that we feel, despite the impulses driven by that amygdala. And that is when all those annoying platitudes actually start becoming possible, but only then. So I'll go through a couple of them. Understanding that what you can and cannot control. You know, you get this all the time, don't you? For somebody who's suffering from imposter syndrome, this is one of those platitudes that makes them want to punch us in the face. You know, they won't, because they have imposter syndrome and they won't have the confidence to. But when you've clearly defined your values, your vision, your purpose, the pathway and actions between here and there become very clear. You're better able to recognize it if an action is bringing you closer or further away from them. You can recognize if you're on or off the path, and therefore you can recognize those things that are your responsibility, those things that you have control over. This is the idea of taking responsibility. You can also recognize those things that you have absolutely no control over and stop worrying and put them aside. Charlie Munger, who's Warren Buffett's best friend, partner, and mentor, described it this way. He said, I have chosen the direction in which I swim. Sometimes the tide's with me, sometimes it's against me, but I never change direction. Nobody can take that attitude without really being clear about that value, vision, and purpose. The next one, learning from mistakes. You've got to learn from your mistakes. Hear it again everywhere. Who wants to make mistakes? But again, it comes back to which brain center are you living in? You know, if you're coming from a place of intellect, the prefrontal cortex, where that long-term thinking, abstract thought, and higher purpose comes, then the attitude to risk and failure becomes completely different. This is where high performers, top athletes, special forces, all these kind of people can go through things, take responsibility of the things that went right and wrong that were in their control, analyze it and make themselves better. How can we improve? Do it better, do it again. However, if you're coming from a place of the amygdala, home of emotion, ego, fear, base instinctive reactions, then failing just makes you feel sick. You know, it's a place to seek safety, take no risk, remain part of the tribe, avoid pain, seek ease. This means the avoidance of failure at all costs. And that is when you begin to have this imposter syndrome, or completely fail to even try in the first place. Choosing the right people to be around. Bill Gates was once asked what the best piece of advice he'd ever received was, and of course that had come from Warren Buffett, his advice from choosing friends. And he gives the same advice when he's talking to students or people graduating from college. And he always says, it's better to hang out with people who are better than you. If you're picking associates, pick out those whose behavior is somewhat better than yours, and you will always drift in that direction. Look at the people you associate with. What qualities do they have that you can have if you want to? Look at the people you can't stand being around. What qualities do they have that you can eliminate if you choose to? It's not very complicated, which is fantastic advice. But the one thing that I would say is crucial before acting on that advice is, how do you decide what better means? If you have reflected deeply on values, vision, and purpose, you will have a good idea what better means for you and choose well. If you are taking that same advice, but you're acting on this idea of better that was scripted into you by somebody else, then the chances are you'll be getting involved with people and standards and values which are not really at the core of your own being. And in this direction does not lie happiness. So again, values, vision, purpose come first. So how do we allow ourselves to be influenced in the way that we would like to? And this is a little bit of an addition into this talk, but I think it's a really useful tool. And it's a thing called the Johari window. And it's based on the premise that there's four sort of areas here. There is that which is known to ourselves, that which is unknown to ourselves, that which is known to others, and unknown to others, which is quite easy. So the first one, that's which is known to ourselves and known to others, is known as the open area. This is where we are most relaxed, we're confident, we're at peace, we know ourselves, everyone knows us, everything's great. However, there's this hidden area, that which we know about ourselves that nobody else knows about ourselves. Now, these are the aspects of ourselves which are hidden. These are the things we'd rather not disclose. This is where imposter syndrome lives. Thirdly, there's other things that we don't know about ourselves, but other people know about us. This is our blind spot. This is the things that people know about you that won't tell you. Or this is things that people know about you and want to tell you, but you're not listening because it doesn't fit in with what you want to hear. So either we're not listening, or we're not, we react in a way that make people not want to tell us about ourselves. And then finally, there's the complete unknown. Nobody knows, you don't know, and others don't know how you'd react in those places. So overall, the objective is to take that open Johari window and make it as big and wide as possible. And the first way to do that is to disempower those things that scare us about ourselves. And that is through disclosure. Admitting our weaknesses, sharing with people, putting ourselves out there, and taking the risk. It disempowers the fear. We reduce that hidden area. And then we need to work out how to ask for and receive and listen to information that is there about ourselves. And this bit can elicit some painful feedback from the old amygdala. because we might hear things that we're pretty uncomfortable about hearing. However, those things that we're hearing are not new. They exist. We're just making ourselves aware with them and facing them. They're nothing new. And then finally, we can begin to expand ourselves and move ourselves into the unknown. This is where we begin to challenge ourselves, do new things, challenge our own perceptions about how we think and are. This is where people start climbing mountains, learn a new instrument, volunteer to work in Peru, learn Chinese, write a book, you know, all these kind of things that people do, and think people go, why in the hell are you doing that? But this is all the stuff we may have thought was beyond us. And the reason we can do it is that we've let go of the fear of failure and worked out that in doing these things, the exercise is about expanding our knowledge of ourselves, not really of actually finishing the book or climbing the mountain, etc. And once we've decided to do this, one of the best things that we can possibly do is get helped. You know, the power of imposter syndrome over us comes from this fear of being exposed. So disempowering it is to expose ourselves in a deliberate and controlled way. This is why high-performing sports people have things like mindset coaches. If you think you have imposter syndrome as a small business leader, try being a big business leader. You know, if you think you've got imposter syndrome as an advisor or therapist, try being an eye surgeon. So it doesn't get easier; it gets harder. Rob Moore, who's a great sort of online influencer and talker, I love listening to him. But he says every time you become successful, all the world does is reward you with an even worse challenge. So the higher we go, the more successful we become, the older we get, the bigger our responsibilities, the more far-reaching the actions or consequences of the things we do. The amygdala fear factor gets bigger, not smaller, as we become successful. The impulse to hide it grows stronger as we become more and more responsible. So there's help in a million places for this, but it's so much easier to access, to ask for, when you come from this place of clarity of values, vision, and purpose. So one of the biggest contributors to success is getting helped. If you listen to any successful person, how did I get here? I got helped, except for Spike Milligan, who won his Lifetime Achievement Award when he was receiving it. He said, I'd like to thank nobody because I did it all myself. But apart from him, everybody else got helped. But it's a lot easier to get helped when you know what you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it. So, you know, that's it from me. Here is some really useful background reading, which has informed what I've said today. 7 Habits are brilliant. Malcolm Gladwell's Theory of Success. Daniel Pink, The Psychology of Motivation. Simon Sinek, he's just Simon Sinek and does his awesomeness. Jordan Peterson, who's my one of my favorite definite rock star psychologists, and Dr. John DeMartini, who's responsible for all that amygdala stuff. So, so that's me. I'd like to just